This is the meeting debrief for the September 12th, 2022 meeting for the Township Board. And you can see decent number of notes on there. And so, opening pretty basic with the call to order, invocation and pledge, roll call, approval of agenda, approval of past meeting minutes, treasurer's report, paying the bills, fire department report, which the fire chief did mention that the open house for fire is going to be October 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. The Planning Commission report, Zoning Board of Appeals report, the GMED presentation on the broadband study, which there were a few questions there, so that one got expanded a little bit on how exactly that would work. The White Lake Community Library presentation, which Virginia was quick on that one. And then we had the new fire truck ceremony and push-in, and that went well. We had a blessing by the White Lake Fire Authority chaplain. Andy O'Reilly was there to shoot it as a video. Commissioner Sears spoke. Christine spoke on the behalf of Senator Bumstead. I spoke a little bit. The fire chief obviously led everything. And then we reconvened for the rest of the meeting. First public comment, I had Michelle send me a message, and actually I realize now it is the same message from last month. She had resent it for me to read as public comment in support of the dog park. Scott mentioned he was thanking the fire department and the fire chief specifically because his daughter had stepped off or fallen off a horse and broken her leg, and he was very impressed with how they'd done to the response on that call and wanted to say good job. Al Richards had spoken, and he had talked about also the fire department doing a good job because he's a son on life support, and they do a good job of helping keep him alive in that endeavor. And then he had a question about the broadband provider, if it was going to go to a single provider, but that's not what the study would be for. The study would be for any providers potentially expanding but applying for grants. Next, we had into our decision items, we had the millage rates, and Lee asked about how these worked because we have the three millage rates, one for township operating, one for fire operating, one for fire equipment. And Tracy explained that basically there's the normal form that the township passes that all the municipalities have to pass for the taxes that they have on part of the mills. That passed. The next thing we had is the past year tax bill, and this was a sewer assessment that wasn't billed at the right time last year in 2021, and it was asked, I believe Renee asked why the board was seeing this, because couldn't the treasurer just do that billing so that they would end up having the bill for 2021 and 2022, and this is essentially a double check, make the treasurer a little more comfortable with moving forward with that, and so that passed and is moving forward. Resolution 2022-18 for the ARPA fund expenditures. And so there were three things here. One was for the fire department equipment, $60,000 for that. Everyone agreed with that. There was a question about if their grant comes through for the more equipment for the new squad, then this money could be used to help take care of the building and that type of stuff. Is there a need there? Answer is yes. Some things could be done with the ceiling, the roof, the flooring. So various things on that. Everyone is on the same page. On the bike trail, talked about the gap that there is in funding if we're going to do a seal coating now. And that ended up, everyone is on the same page with approving that as well. The question was asked, what happens if the other municipalities don't approve their portion? Are we going to end up having to approve more money to cover our portion? I said, my take on that would be that then the project would stop, at that point. I don't think we should cover a disproportionate amount, but it could be revisited, but that's how I would see it going. The third thing was the roof, and this was more debatable, and we'd actually gotten another quote just yesterday, so that wasn't in the packet. The three quotes in the packet were for flat roofs. The quote that came in yesterday was for a slanted roof, and so that was more money. And there was discussions about the air conditioning units, which are obviously in bad shape, on the roof, and the one can't even get back up to running. The newest one is from 1994, and so moving those is more money. And so there was various discussion among the board, and the motion ended up being made to approve the resolution, but only for the fire equipment and facilities and for the bike trail maintenance, not for the roof. And so that ended up passing in that way. Next, we had the land request on East River Road, and that passed. So we'll be going through the process of setting up in the next meeting the minimum bid, and then the next meeting opening bids. We had a land request between Putnam and Catalpa. That passed as well. Both of these passed with realtor appraisal comparables. So we'll be reaching out, Lexi will be reaching out to the two realtors that had offered to do comparables for free and see if we can get those comparables so we can use those as guidance when we're setting that minimum bid at this next meeting. Next, we had the Constitution Week proclamation. This passed. Everyone supported that. Next, we had the leaf pile, and I didn't want to put this off forever. It's a decent expense for what it seems to be, but that did end up passing, doing the leaf pile maintenance out at the transfer station. Next, we moved into our discussion items. The first one being food sovereignty, and everyone was in support of that. Not too much discussion, so I'll work on getting something written up and bringing that to the next meeting, also as discussion still. Next, we had the ARPA funds / dog park, and we had the quote in there. Decent amount of discussion about this. I also brought up broadband, and so a few things on here. I think a few controversial things. One, the board, and I think probably a decent number of people out in the community are split quite strongly on the dog park, of it being a frivolous, unneeded expense versus something that would benefit some of the people in the community. And so that's how that conversation went. No great conclusion there. On the broadband study, the general consensus of the board was to not contribute the $5,000 toward that study, because not sure that it would end up really being a benefit. So if it would expand internet service in the township, it would certainly be a thing worth contributing. Very small amount for that. But if it doesn't end up working, then it ends up being a contribution to nothing, essentially. So overall, the board was against it. So I'll let Morgan know today. Next, we had assessing, and really three things. I include in the packet 2 things of substance, and I was fairly optimistic originally when I was making these packets last Wednesday about having a public kiosk for a computer, but it's a security concern because our systems get connected through central dispatch, and they're very wary about the security of having a public kiosk for something like that. So that's really held up, and the other options aren't very good either. So that's where that is. And then physically visiting more places for inspections in the township is a difficult thing to do logistically and financially. And so that also a difficult one. That's where we are on that. And then Tracy brought up that one of the other concerns of McCabe was having the township really drive the assessing process rather than the county. And we contract with the county on it, but ultimately it's the responsibility to provide for the assessing services with the township. Now, the way the township is doing that is contracting with the county. But that's where those are. Finally, we had the water policy, and this one, quite controversial, obviously, among the board. The section was included about allowing wells to stay in, even if people connect, as long as they're not contaminated and they're not for consumption. The other part that was being discussed among the water policy board is paying the connection fee when it runs past all of the properties because it's available at that time. The board overall was against that, and so I'll bring that to the water policy board. Went over a little bit, of the difficulties of how this multiple municipal agency works and the potentialities of not having the same types of ordinances in place and what a breach of contract could lead to on things like that. Then we had our second public comment. Marilyn had mentioned that for checking assessing numbers, the Muskegon County GIS has assessing numbers on there, which is true. Now, if a government owns that property, it won't have an assessing number on the county GIS. But overall, the GIS system works pretty good. Now, McCabe and his criticisms, he has criticisms of that too, so it wouldn't exactly address all of his concerns. But nevertheless, for most people's use, even if you just Google or search Muskegon County GIS or Muskegon County Property Viewer, because there's a few different GIS systems, a few different maps you can look at, but the Property Viewer shows that information. It's pretty useful. It has a legal description on there. As an owner that isn't necessarily updated, all of the time. It does get updated, but not necessarily at the moment like it does in an assessing. But nevertheless, a good suggestion by Maryland, because that does work well if people are looking to use that or looking for that type of information. Al made a comment about the ARPA funds. And his main concern is, are the ARPA funds really associated with COVID? Because it seems like politically at the high level, at the federal level, these are being passed because of COVID. But they're being used for, completely other things. I mean, we're discussing a dog park, we're discussing broadband, and we're looking at fire equipment, and we're discussing a bike trail, and the things we've already passed, with the maintenance equipment and the building, and these types of things. And so it was a little bit, and we went over a little bit of this, but when Trump was near the end of his office, he had passed the CARES Act. Right, and he'd spent right in there about $2 trillion on that type of thing, and there were limitations on that where you had to buy gloves or masks, this type of thing. And the township even sent some of that money. I don't think the money was fully spent by the township because it was enacted and mostly done by the time I had gotten in, but a little bit was left when I was here after I'd taken office. And I think there was a little bit of money left that the township ended up sending back. I'm not sure exactly how much. I think that's correct. Then Biden, once he got in, he passed another $2 trillion, all right, many trillions that the federal government is passing, right? I mean, we're all seeing the inflation. And so the ARPA funds were originally this political move at the large level, and then they were very restricted. You could only expand water, you could expand sewer, you could expand broadband, you could give employees bonuses. And so it was quite strict on what you couldn't do with it, and only what you could do with it. Because my initial thing, was to pay down debt, and you couldn't do that. So then the only reasonable thing I thought was to expand broadband. So I'd looked into that quite heavily, and ended up not really making any progress there. Put in quite a bit of time and effort, but haven't really made substantive progress. Although we should have some internet expansion probably in 2025 at the earliest, and these things are planned a long ways out, of course. And so the rules were adjusted for ARPA, and for places under $10 million, which Dalton's way under, is set up so it can be government services. Now, they eliminated some things from there. One of the things is debt. You still can't pay down debt with it. And so the things that we're spending on are the types of things that it's designed for, made for, as this idea to adjust for the economic damage from the lockdowns that were done by the government as well. And so it is, it's a decent debate. I understand his point, and, debated it myself internally, and I try to come at everything from a moral standpoint, acquired moral obligations, and to not take the $846,000 then penalizes the people of the township who have contributed taxes and are going to get hit by the inflation caused by these things that are happening at the federal level. So I don't think the Fed should have passed them. I think that was immoral, but I think not accepting it and using it for these various types of projects, putting it in roads, this type of thing, would also be immoral at this level. So two different levels of decision making is how I view it. And so he had expressed his concerns there. And then we had Carrie, and not Carrie on the board, a person from the public. Carrie had expressed a question about the setting of the minimum price on the land bids, and so we went over that. That will reach out to a couple of realtors who had done it before, collected the comparables, and offered to do it for free. And then the next Carrie, because another Carrie, but also not the Carrie on the board, but not the Carrie from the previous comment, had a question about the land sale meetings, exactly how those work. In this first one, we established that the township's going to sell it, how we're going to come up with the minimums. Then now that we've done that, we'll reach out to the people that made the requests, and we'll come up with the guidance numbers for the minimums. In the second meeting, we'll set that minimum price, and then in the third meeting, we'll open those bids. Then Tracy had mentioned that I should mention that we're having a joint session on October 17th, and this is going to be the Board of Trustees, the Planning Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals together as a working session, a discussion session, a special meeting. We had one last year just for people to express what they think is going well, what they think is going poorly, to discuss whatever they may have to bring and try to get people on the same page to the extent possible, of course, and get some alignment and at least have those discussions. They are public meetings, so the public are welcome to come. The seating will be different because it's a decent amount of board members, so we'll set up tables in the middle of the room. So all the board members can sit at it, so I guess the public would sit around that, so maybe slightly odd as far as that goes. And then we'll record it, of course, and post it so people can watch it that way as well. And then finally, Tracy mentioned that the Duff House closing is occurring on Wednesday, and so that should be wrapped up here very soon, which will free up enough of that money from property sales to pay down that debt that we're covering, the $500,000 on the sewer fund, which along with the 60% increase this year in rates means that's on its first solid footing financially since it was put in 2006, since the project was started then. So that is everything at that meeting in its brief version. Of course, the video of the entire meeting is up on the site. There is that about 20-minute gap there where we were overdoing the fire truck push-in. So if anyone has any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out. My direct line at the office is area code 231-332-6700 or email supervisor@daltontownship.org. Otherwise, this is Jeff Martin signing off. Thank you.